Understanding the config manager architecture and components. So what do you think of my intro? Uh, uh, it might have been a little breathy, I know, but and admittedly there was a piece of it that I actually kind of wrote parts of it down because I wanted to start out this series a little differently. If you've spent any time with me in any of these other series that I've done, you know that sometimes you can get a little, I don't know, they become a little of the same all the time. So what I'm attempting to do with this series is just get a little more intimate with you, really, and help you understand exactly what you need to know, but also have a little fun along the way. And I think we're going to do that because, honestly, Config Manager is one of those technologies that, at least for me, so personal story, way back in the day, well, not that long ago, but back in the day, I was managing, and I forget how many desktops, like 500 desktops and 30 or 40 servers by myself because of all of the automations that one could put together with a technology like Config Manager. It really honestly is, I said in the last nugget, it really honestly is the administrator's force multiplier. Everybody has the write and whiteboard, the quote board where you put up silly quotes that people say whenever you're working in IT. And one of the guys that I worked with, also a config manager admin, had this quote he liked to say, that he said, a good systems admin only works 40 hours a week. I think about that. You might laugh, but it's true. Right? A good systems admin is one that implements all the necessary automations so that all the scut work is something you don't have to deal with anymore. And that's completely doable with Config Manager. I mean, I really honestly can't, I'll just have to show you over these next 20 nuggets how really, if you just put forth the time and effort, you can do some really smart stuff here with this tool and really make your life much easier. You will go home at the end at 5 o'clock at the end of the day. Now, in this nugget, I want to spend some time helping you understand how to do that. We're not going to click any buttons yet. Right? In fact, I have this whole server here, Config Manager 1, which is the server we'll be using throughout the entire series. We're gonna play with assets. We're gonna create device collections. We're going to add devices. We're going to create an asset intelligence catalog. We're going to build a series of packages and even applications over here. We're going to deploy software updates and operating systems and all the fun stuff that makes this whole process of dealing with the minutia and just the awfulness of a Windows environment that much more tolerable. So we have to start, however, by talking about all the different stuff that makes up Config Manager. Built into Config Manager are up to 20 different roles. And these roles can be consolidated on a single machine. In fact, if you follow along with me, you'll be doing 19 of the 20 onto a single machine, or they can be distributed across any number of computers for reasons of load balancing and high availability. Some roles can also be installed to multiple computers at once. So if you think about it, right? I need to deploy an enormously large package. Maybe I'm pushing out Office, right? And so the Office package is so big that I need to have one server, maybe 2 or 3 servers here that are distribution points so that my clients can go to here, or they can go to here, or they can go to here, and none of these servers end up getting overwhelmed with the number of clients coming in. Now, at the same vein, Config Manager is also comprised of one or more sites as well. So we're actually not going to work with a CAS site until later. We're going to work in a single primary site for the entirety of this series until the 20th nugget. And in that 20th nugget, I'll talk more about the differences between a CAS, a primary, and a secondary site. Really, just recognize that a primary site has a database. Secondary site doesn't. And a central site is one that is used whenever you plan on expanding beyond one server. That's all you really need to know for now. Now, primary sites. Each primary site is going to contain usually each of these roles. And they tend to be determined, not always, most of the time, by geographic location. Okay, so we have the Denver site here, and then we open up a new office in Omaha, well, then that's probably a good idea to have two different sites because this network line is probably not very good. I have another one here in Las Vegas. I'll probably put another site there. Just again, because of the geographic distances between these locations. Now, I say most of the time because it doesn't always have to be the case. In some, one-off situations, you might have one half of IT that doesn't trust the other half, or you have two different lines of business that have to be managed entirely separately. But for the most part, geography is what makes the difference between having one site, two sites, or n number of sites that are out there. So I told you there are 20 roles built into Config Manager, and you don't really need to know what these roles are right now. Okay, I've got them listed here because we're going to be working with all of them except for this one right here, the System Health Validator point, which is here. We won't actually be working with that here because trying to deal with network access protection, almost nobody implements Windows or Microsoft's network access protection. They may in the future, but right now no one does. And it's just really not of scope or in scope for the exam. But everything else we're actually going to talk about. And there's a couple you have to be conscious of because some of these are you will use them all the time. Other ones you're not going to use so much. The first one here is this distribution point. A distribution point is essentially a file server. Okay, and you probably have file servers out in your environment. You probably have a couple of them. And commonly, many environments will create more than one distribution point that are already their file servers because they just want to distribute the load whenever they're pushing updates or pushing software. So if you have one or more file servers and they've got plenty of space, well, those file servers can be a useful distribution point. Another thing you will probably use all the time is the management point because that is how all of your clients out in the world end up talking to your Config Manager infrastructure. It's your primary point of access for all those clients. And in fact, that's where clients download their policy. That's where you deploy, a lot of times where you can deploy agents from if you use certain agent deployment types. But the MP has to be up and running for it to work, just like the DP has to be up and running for stuff to be able to push. A reporting services point is often used or is used in order to create SQL reports. Okay, we won't talk about that for a good long time, but the reporting services point, anytime you start generating those reports, you're going to do it against SQL Server reporting services. Also is the site database server. Now, any computer at all that participates in one of these 20 roles is what we think of as a site system. Okay, a site system is just simply anytime I distribute one of these things out. So my file server, my IT file server, my regular file server, I've enabled that as a distribution point. It becomes a site system. It's not a site server because, well, that's the license piece of Config Manager. Right? That's the guts of Config Manager. But any of these machines can be a DP. I can have multiple MPs too if I want. The site database server and the site server kind of go hand in hand because, well, the site server commonly, especially in a primary site, will have a site database installed to it. So these are kind of some of the big ones. Application catalogs are used for when users are given access to install their own applications. Sounds a little crazy, but in Config Manager 2012, this is a core philosophy for delivering apps. And honestly, it works. It really, really does. The synchronization point here, this asset intelligence synchronization point is used for turning some of this raw data that we collect about this inventory data that we collect from our systems and turning it into useful product, like winword.exe actually means Microsoft Office 2010 Word. Endpoint protection is our security. That's forefront endpoint protection. The enrollment points here are used for device management. The failback status point is used when clients cannot talk to their management point, but need to send error messages into the infrastructure. The mobile device management point is used for, as you can guess, managing mobile devices. The out-of-band service point, which you may or may not use, has to do with dealing with managing clients whenever they're powered off, so things like wake on LAN. The software update point, can you guess? WSUS, pushing out software updates. And then the state migration point is used by OS deployment for, it's a temporary storage location for user profile data. So if this seemed like I went through it really fast, don't worry, because we're going to talk about each one of these throughout the next 20 nuggets. But just recognize that of these can exist in multiple locations in a site, and then again, in and among the sites that you may have. So, again, Denver and Las Vegas here. So I might have DPs here and DPs down here in combination. That's all I want you to know for now. So each of these 20 roles contributes one or more services to the greater functioning of your entire configuration manager infrastructure. And you'll notice if you take another look through all of the 20 nuggets that we're going to go through, those 20 nuggets, that the title of each nugget should give you kind of a clue as to which of the site services we're actually going to deploy. So that's kind of the gist of what I'm hoping that you'll get out of this very cursory introduction to all the stuff that we're going to be talking about here again. There is some more discussion to talk about sites and how we're going to deal with sites, but I kind of want to leave that till we get to that final 20th nugget, because a lot of the early content as it relates to SMS and config manager spent a lot of time focusing on sites, and so consequently I think actually confused people more than it needed to. We are going to have one server and one site, and we're going to go through all the stuff you need to know before we ever start fracturing it off into multiple sites, because I think that's easier to learn in that perspective than trying to focus in on the differences between sites now. So what have we talked about in this nugget? We've talked about the config manager architecture and all the different components, and specifically the roles that make up a config manager infrastructure. You spent a minute listening to me bloviate about how things have changed over the years, and I kind of tell you these stories because I made some grandiose statements in that last nugget, where I said you could even get to the point where you have a Windows environment you never have to troubleshoot again. And I honestly believe that. You're not going to have it immediately. It's going to take a lot of elbow grease. It's going to take a lot of hard work. You're going to have to spend a lot of time really truly understanding how automations work. But with all this stuff put into place, and all the right roles, and putting them on all the right computers, and with all the right site system stuff set up, I think you could actually really significantly change the entire way you end up delivering IT services. And maybe even get to that point where you don't have to troubleshoot again, because your users can just simply rebuild their computers and re-download their applications and reset all their user settings anytime they have any kind of a problem. So hopefully I've whet your appetite here for how all this works. Coming up in that next nugget, we're going to spend some time really focusing in on the install process. All right, with DVD in hand, how do I go from regular server to config manager server? But until that point, I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.